And we're back. The last recording didn't quite go well. We're COMP1002. It's week 6, lesson 6, part 2. We're just talking about CSS Zen Garden, and I think I probably got cut off. But this is an example of the same CSS we were talking about before, and how it's been spun, the same content using different CSS, sorry, and how it spins our, kind of the information we're getting here into a new style. Okay, so again, some people use this site as a means to get inspired. Some people actually try and submit their own designs as well to try and, try stuff out here so they can get some comments and feedback. So let me just try one more time. Hopefully this won't kill our connection again. Here's another one, right? Again, it's another design with the same content, okay? Same content. This is it looks like a single page app, like almost like a more modern app, with a kind of a background with different layers. It's kind of neat and it looks really nice. Okay, so we've tried a couple of things out, and I just wanted to show you CSS Zen Garden as just some place to go for inspiration. Now you can tell our site is pretty darn boring compared to those, right? So we need to fix this up. We need to kind of add some more styling here so it looks a little nicer. One thing is, for me, I think more modern styles nowadays, if I want to target, right now I'm only targeting my H1 element, and I'm specifying that I want it to have a consoles font, which is kind of a very boring, retro kind of font, right? That might work for some retro sites, but maybe not for mine. The most common ones that you want to see is some kind of sans serif font for most websites right now. And the reason for that is because it's easy on the eyes compared to a serif font. Serif would be something like Times New Roman, all right? If you're using a Times font, Times New Roman, and it's got serifs, by the way, do you know who knows what a serif is, by the way? Serifs. Serif. In typography, a serif is a small line attached to the end of a stroke, like this. That's a serif, right? And what it is serifs. Look at the F here as an example. How this little downstroke is, or this it's almost like an end, right? So sans serif is from the French without a serif. So it doesn't have these little serifs that are attached to our font face. This is a sans serif font. Take a look, right? Because this has just straight lines. This has these little, endpoints, right? So a serif font, again, not as popular these days to use in our web design. And the reason for it is it's much more difficult to view a serif font, right, on some browsers. That's the idea behind it. So let's go back here. So right now we have consoles, which is kind of a serif. They have some serifs in there. Look at the L, right? You have this piece of the L. Here's another example of a serif font. Products, services, our staple default font here is a serif type font, which is not great. So if I want to affect everything all my fonts on the entire page by default, the way to do that is to target the body tag. All right. So why? Because the body tag, although we say body tag, body element contains all of its child elements. If you think about it as a cascade, right, or a tree, a hierarchy, if you will, of elements. We start at the top with the body element inside of our page. Underneath the body element would be the second node, or a branch that's lower, right? So we'll talk about that later on. So I'm going to target my body element now. And in my body element, I want to add in my font family. So I'm just going to I'm going to kind of cut this stuff out here for a second. I'll leave my line height and my font size. So let's copy this and put this back in here for a second. Look at the changes that go on in the background. This is real time, right? I don't want it to have, I want to change my consoles to some kind of Arial, sans serif kind of fonts, right? There it is, sans serif. So if you notice now, other than the title of my page, you can see that all my elements here they're all sans serif without serifs, right? That's what sans serif means, right? And I don't think 40 makes any sense. I'm going to go back down to 20. So they're all, my page has 20 pixel size. My line height, that's too big, because line height is the separation between lines, right? Maybe I want to make it so that it's 25, right? So I'm doing this in real time so you can see the changes here on the left, right? 25. But yet, I still can use the same kind of elements here. Look at this stuff here that I got going on, right? You can see that I got a font family that's, I'm replicating what I'm doing here. So here, I'm targeting the entire body. Here, I'm only targeting the H1 element, all H1 elements on the page, right? Now, we only have one H1 element here. So if I go back to my index.html, and just to show you, I'm going to replicate this piece here, right? Again, so let's take this piece, this section. I'm going to copy it, and we'll do the exact same section underneath. And you can see that both H1 elements have red and have that font, right? Because when I use my CSS here, right? Here's my CSS. I'm not targeting one H1 element. I'm targeting all of them. Okay? Questions so far with this one? Because this is where, I'll tell you right now, CSS is the developer's bane, right? We look at it and we're like, it sucks. I hate this. I don't get it, right? It's our weakest point. When it comes to web development, CSS is our like Achilles heel, right? Because it's hard. It's not easy like HTML. Yes?
Just getting better at this.
Yes. This piece, right? So understanding basic things about CSS. I'm not going to ask you to style a page like CSS Zen Garden on your test. No, right? But you should understand about CSS. All right? The basics we're going to talk about today. Nothing more. Okay? Okay, so if you notice, right? If you notice on our page here, we have two H1 elements, right? And we have two paragraphs. So let's say I want my paragraphs, all paragraphs. Let me try this out now, because we have our page in the background. We're going to say all paragraphs of our page. I want them to be affected. See how when I do that, how both those paragraphs are highlighted with my rule? That's showing you what I'm targeting. I'm targeting both paragraphs when I say just use the P tag. The P tag as a selector selects all paragraphs. That's how you should read it. So I want all paragraphs to do blank. What do I want it to do, right? And I can do another, let's do another change. Let's say, let's make all my paragraphs have a color, right? Make it really ugly, green. Make it a green color, right? There we go. All paragraphs have a color of green. Christmas colors, huh? What do you think of our page now, right? Isn't this fantastic? Look, we're almost at Thanksgiving, or sorry, Thanksgiving is past. We're almost at Halloween. We can talk about Christmas, huh? Because that's what happens, right? In the stores, we have Christmas going on pretty soon. Actually, if you go to Costco now in different places, there's Christmas trees everywhere. That's mad. Our consumerism. Okay. So as you can see, if I hover here, this is the great thing about having a live preview with brackets, right? This is generating this, right? If I click here, I can see that it's targeting the whole page. If I click here, it's targeting all my H1 elements. If I click here, it's targeting my paragraph tags, right? And how about if I want to target other larger elements, like, for example, my header or my footer? I can do that too, obviously. It kind of follows. So here's my H1 and my paragraph tags. Let's put another rule in here for my header. So let's say header, right? And you can see how this whole thing is highlighted now, right? My header tag, right? And let's say I want to use my colors here. Let's make another color for this header tag. We'll make it so that it's yellow, right? Because, you know, what the hell, right? Here's our color yellow. Hey, how come, here's something I want to ask you guys. How come my first element, my home tag, my home element got changed, but none of my other links? Yes?
Because everything else is a link, and that's the actual text.
Everything else is a link. Well, where's my link getting its style from? Nope. There's no act. I'm not targeting it with any act. Remember, we're not doing any CSS for that. Why is my link, my home link, being targeted as yellow, but everything else is blue? Where's my blue color coming from? Yeah. That's right, but where's my blue color coming from in my underline? Where is that coming from? My default browser styles we talked about before. Remember, I'm getting default browser styles on top of these styles. Remember we talked about resetting our styles way back, right? That's why we reset our styles, because I would expect that all my text inside my header tag, my header element gets changed to yellow, but it's not because of my default browser styles. This is where rules clash, right? It's called specificity, right? So how do we know which one takes precedent? Well, the last one, and the last one that takes place is our browser, right? Okay, so let's change this to something we can see to make this more apparent. So we'll go to make it to black, right? So you can see that it's black. And then you notice that that's black, but everything else is blue. If I change this to blue, right, now it looks all the same. If I go to something else, like a deep sky blue, you can see that that's different too. Every time I change, only the first one changes, but not the other ones. Well, yes, it's true, right? That there's different states to these things. This is the actual link that I'm on right now. And that's why I'm getting the style that I'm getting, right? Notice also that it's not a link. How come? Well, let's go back to what I've done within my index.html so you can see that. Up on top here, remember I told you I've got to move this text that's in here between my anchor tag in order for me to be effective. And I did this on purpose for you guys. Just let me show you. So, ta-da. You put it in here, and now it goes to purple. It's not even doing the blue I want. Why? Because my default browser styles are taken over. Okay, so don't think that I'm not targeting this. It's not working. It's working. It's just being overridden, right? Overridden by my default browser styles. Okay. Okay. So that's that one. Let's go back to my main CSS. And so I've colored my color as deep sky blue. How about this? What if I change my background color to my header tag? Can I do that? How would I do that? Well, we're going to learn about these later on. But when I say background, start typing background, not repeat, color, right? Let's target this with a weird yellow, right, to make it ugly. Now you can see that there's a yellow color in the background of my header, right? By using background-color. Notice it's American spellings, right? Color. Don't use color, O-U-R, or it will not work, right? Doesn't know about that. Okay, so that's my header and my background color. I can also further specify things like I can kind of target further down here. We'll do that in a second. Let's do our footer too. Why not? So we'll say footer. We'll target our footer tag in here, which is the copyright statement. And normally what I have is, look, my copyright's pretty darn big, right? Pretty darn big here. And if I go to my index.html and I go back down here, if you notice I have an H4 tag, but it's still pretty darn big, even though I'm using an H4 tag to put my copyright element in there, right? How about if I use the small, right, small tag in here? Let's see what that does. Does that get affected? And it does. See how it changes from the size changed according to my tag. Well, remember, small. Where am I getting the styles from my small tag? My browser styles. That's where it's coming from, right? So you have to understand the difference between browser styles, default built-in browser styles that are different from browser to browser, which means I may not get a consistent look and feel across browsers if I allow my default browser styles to sit here, right? Okay, there we go. So that's my small tag, but I want to kind of target it with a little bit different. So I'm going to say, well, my footer, just because we like background colors, so we'll say background dash color, right? For my footer will be something else. Let's make it a bisque, right? Because that's just a color we can choose, right? Bisque. Yay! What an interesting color. Yes.
What people actually ask for that?
What?
When anyone actually asks for that, like you need to change a copyright to a different color.
Well, people ask for that. Well, you'd be the one suggesting it, right? Because if you're the developer, you're going to come up with some suggestions, right? Because the average client goes, I don't know, you're the developer, you tell me, right? So as a designer, you've got to come up with your styles and colors and all that stuff. That's a really great question. So I'm coming up with some styles for my website, and you want to make your own personal website look nice, right? So how do we do that? Because if you're not a developer, if you're not a designer, who's a designer in this room? I think there's maybe a couple. For these designers, what do you do when you kind of pull up some colors and stuff? How do you choose the colors in your site? That's great. I was going to use that for you right now. And what do? You create your own color palettes. Well, I like to kind of suggest this to the class as well. let's take a look at some of this example, right? So if I go back to color, I think it's .adobe.com, right? If I go to color.adobe.com, I got this really cool tool that comes up eventually. Looks like this, right? And I want to create a color, color palette for myself, right? And I want it to be, there's some color theory. If you're a designer, you understand color theory a little bit. Let's say, for example, I want to use a complementary color scheme, which is, hey, look, I got my Christmas colors right here, right? My red and my yellow, right? My red and my green. So you notice it's suggesting that for this red, right, the color should be this green and this green. If I move my color here across the wheel, it suggests other colors and actually gives me the hexadecimal values and the RGB values of the color palette. Okay? So if you want to kind of make something that's complementary, that looks good together, because complementary colors kind of complement each other. And again, you have to use this sparingly, by the way. If I was going to make a red site, I would use some black, some white, and a little bit of green for highlighting. I don't think I'd want to use too much green there, because it would drive me crazy, right? Like really Christmassy. But who makes red sites these days? Unless I'm making a site for Valentine's Day or something like that, it's got to be very specific areas. And by the way, you can have different color schemes, not just for the entire site, but also for specific areas of the site, right? Like specific panel or something. Sometimes complementary is too much, and you want to use something like shades, right? Shades of red. Let's use some shades of blue, which is a very corporate look, right? Here's if I want to make my site look kind of blue, more of a corporate blue look, I can make it lighter by kind of dragging it towards the middle. And this is a great little tool to give you the colors. So here's something that I can do with colors. I specified in my CSS, right, for my header a color of yellow. And if you notice, yellow is a built-in color inside my CSS, right? But I don't want to use yellow. I want to use a specific color, right? Well, I can do it with two different ways. I can say my RGB color by doing this. Let's say I want to make this blue right here for the background, right? So I can do this. I can say, start typing RGB, open bracket, right? And I can start putting the colors, 79, 179, 191, right? And if I've done this correctly, and if I haven't failed to do this, if I go back here, if you notice now, my blue is there, right? The exact blue that I got from this piece of my wheel, right? By using the RGB values inside my background color. So that's one way you can do it. You can use RGB, right? You can specify background color RGB and then the RGB colors to give a specific color as opposed to just blue, yellow, right? I want more control over that with my website, and this is the way I would do that, right? Here's another way to do it, which is more popular, right? So I want, instead of bisque, which means nothing to me, I want a specific color. Maybe I want to use this color as a highlight down there on the bottom. So I click this one, and I get the hexadecimal value here. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to copy, right? So 35787F as an example, right? Go back to here, and instead of it being bisque, I'm going to say pound. I'm going to use pound, and then put in a hexadecimal value for my color, like this. Right? So let's take a look at this now, the effect it has, right? So there's my hexadecimal value for my color. So I've got different colors going on in my page based on what I've chosen in my color wheel. Yeah. You good? All right, so this is cool, but now I notice a problem. I notice a problem that in this part, I've changed my color to blue. What should I do to my text here? Because right now, can you really see what's written here? It's bad, eh? This is where contrast comes into place, right? I need some contrast for my text color. So my text color should be something like a white or a brighter color, right? I could use a complementary color that comes with my scheme if I want to, or I can just use white. So how do I target, and here's the question for you guys, how do I target my footer so the color, remember, when I use color, I want to use my color for my text as white. What do I do? Color white, right? What about if I want to use a specific hexadecimal value for my color white? So I can do color, I can do white, right, which kind of colors my footer white. I can do that. But if I want to be very specific about the white that I want to use, I could also do this, right? I can also go, F, 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 right? Which would be the white color. If I wanted to not quite do F, 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 I can maybe do, what if I did like something like FFFF EE, right? I could do that too. Almost white. How's that? So each of the hexadecimal values there's a color pair, right? So the first two in this thing is the red value, right? Hexadecimal values, if you don't know what they are, go from 0 to 255, right? That's why RGB values for some people who are not used to hexadecimal make more sense. This also goes from 0 to 255, right? So this FFFFEE, if you notice, it gives me a preview if I hover over it in brackets here, right? It tells me what the color is going to look like an off-white, right? And if you notice the second color, so this is the first is red, the R, right? The second one, the second color pair is green, and the third color pair is blue, right? That's what it means. So I can do the same thing, the same, almost exact same color, right? By putting in a similar value, let's say in RGB. So I say, here, let's do it, instead of this, we'll do RGB, and we'll do the same thing, 255, 255, 255, right? And that's white. So I can do the same thing with RGB, right? So those are the two most popular color schemes, right? Here's one. Not only could I do RGB, but I can use RGBA, right? So what does the A stand for in my RGB? Anybody have an idea? Alpha transparency. So if I go to alpha transparency and I change this to 50, right, as an example, and if I go back down here and save it, okay, so I'm RGBA, that doesn't work. Let's go to 0.5, right? How about 0.1? Look what's happening to my header. It becomes lighter, yeah? I can see through it because it's more transparent. Here's one. So if I go back to 1, it's 100% transparent. If I go to 0.9, it's 90% transparent. 0.8, 0.7, look what's happening. 0.6, 0.5, 0.4, 0.3, 0.2, 0.1. Right? As it keeps going down the scale, it gets less and less opaque and more transparent. I can see through it. So RGBA, red, green, blue, and alpha transparency, right, as another channel that you can add in. Okay, so color is very, very important. And we're going to see there's another color scheme that I can use, HSL, right, and HSLA. We'll talk about those two things as well. Not as popular and not as supported. We'll talk about which ones are supported because this is part of CSS3 as well, and which ones are not. So I can target what we're talking about so far, and I'm just going to change this back to 1 so it's fully transparent. Again, I don't think this is enough contrast for my links. We're going to talk about link text in a second. Okay, cool. So I got some little bit of ugly styling on my page. I'm only targeting my main tags here. That's what I'm doing to affect my changes, right? Okay, here's something. We put a class of active. We've been doing it for a while, right? And my class of active right now is on my home link. I want to affect it. Let's think what I'm actually doing. So if I'm targeting the anchor tag, that's what it is, right? Any anchor tag, hear my words, any anchor tag that has a class of active, right? Any anchor tag with text, the tag that has a class of active. How do I write that rule? And this is how you think about it, right? So I'm just going to kind of skip in here for a second. Give me some space. Let's just so that you guys can see, not for any other reason. And in here, I'm going to put my rule. So I'm going to target my anchor tag, any anchor tag that has a class of active, right? So, or I can just put anything that has a class of active. Class is a dot, just like we were learning in our shortcuts. ID is a hash, right? So I go dot from my class, active. I'm targeting my active class. So now you can see how, it's hard to see, but actually in the live preview, you can see how I've highlighted my home, right? And then that's the link, the list item is where I put it, right? Take a look. In my index.html, I put my class of active not on the anchor tag, right? Not on the anchor tag itself, but on the list item. See, the list item has it. So the list item is a container, right? And there's the container right there, right? That contains an anchor tag, that contains a home text, right? These are nested containers, right? I want you to think of it that way. Okay, let's go back. So I'm targeting my active tag, and I want to change the color. So instead of it's this blue, I want to go back to my color scheme, right? Here's my color wheel. I want to make it so that it's a little bit darker, like this, right? So when I'm targeting when it's active, it's going to have a different color than when it's not active. I want to make this so it's this color, or maybe a lighter color because we can't see the text right now. We'll make it this one. 69EFFF. I'm going to just take this, and I'm going to go back to my page using my color scheme, and I'm going to say the is 69EFFF. So anything with an active class on it, any element that has an active class applied to it, that's how you read it, has a background color of 69EFFF. Let's see how that looks. Yay, this is what you get. Take a look. So that's kind of weird, eh? Because the entire line got highlighted. How come the entire line got highlighted? Anybody? Well, because what I've said is that the entire list item, and the list item isn't just this home link, it's all the way to here, right? But not this part. Take a look how this part has not been included. How come? We'll talk about that in a bit. So this is the active element. Well, let's switch that. Let's make products the active element. Let's see what happens if I do that. So I'm going to go back to my index.html, and I'll add services as the class active to services as well. Let's do that. So I'm going to copy the class active, and we'll put it on services and see what it does. So here's my class active. And now if you notice, both my home and my services list items are highlighted with that color, right? Because it's targeting all elements that have the class active applied to them, right? That's what it's doing. That's how I want you to read the CSS. All elements that have a class active applied to them. Okay, cool. Let me just take this away for a second so you can see the difference. Boom, it goes away, right? And if you notice here in the live preview, no matter which list item I target, it kind of flashes for a second to tell you which one I'm looking at, right? If I look at the A tag, right, it shows me the link itself, the actual text inside the link. If I click the A tag, if I want to just target the text, right, here's my text. I just want to target the text, the anchor tag, right? I just want to target my anchor tag, okay? Right? Again, anytime I click on it, it just highlights the text. So you see I can target any one of these elements. I can go the list item, that level. I can target the UL, which is also a container for all the list items, which is also in the nav element, which is also in the header element. And these are all nested containers, one within the other. Think about boxes within boxes within boxes. That's what I want you to think of it like, okay? So if I want to target my home link, as an example, my home link, and I want to say that all elements that have a class active attached to them, that also have an anchor tag inside of them, right? That also have, I want to target my text inside my anchor tag, that's inside all elements that have a class of active. How do I do that? I can combine this stuff, and this is where people get lost. So I'll forgive you if you don't get it at once, okay? It's okay. So here's how I would write that. I have a class of active, right? I have, I want to say all A tags that have active, all elements that have a class of active which have an A tag inside of them. Whew. Right? I want the color for those elements to go white. See what I've done. So now, not only have I affected my anchor tag, I've overwritten my browser-specific rules that are built in So instead of my anchor tag being blue, it's now white. Okay? My A tag, my A element, right? Let's go back. So if I want to say all my anchor tags, anything that has an anchor tag in it has a different color than blue, right? How would I do that? Well, I would just go up here and put my all anchor tags, targeting all of them, and I want to have all of them have a default color of kind of maybe a yellow color, because we're using blue and yellow, let's say. So we'll say yellow. Okay, they're all yellow. But guess what? Not this one, right? Because look at the order that I've put these in. What if I did it the other way around? Watch. So I said, here's my yellow color, and here this is white, and these are yellow. But I mixed these up. I went like this. Watch. I take this one from here, and I cut it, and I put it down here. Okay? Notice how both rules are being affected. They're both affecting things. But this one is way more specific than this one. This one here is very general, and it hits all anchor tags. It doesn't matter where I put it, right? This one is very specific. This is where specificity comes in. I'm specifically targeting all anchor tags that have an active, that are within an element that has an active class applied to it. Whew. I know, words that I'm using. So I want you to be able to read the rule with me, right? Let's go back. Let's put this back in order. Okay. All right. So we've talked about colors. We've talked about how to write some styles, very basic ones. We've talked about the difference between a sans serif and a serif type font like Consolus, right? And let's make a really serif type font like Times New Roman. All right, so let's say Times New Roman. If I don't know, by the way, if I don't know the font family, I can just go like this. If I start typing Times, sometimes what it'll do is it'll give me that that kind of look and feel to it, Times. If the browser doesn't know what it is, by the way, what if I put in another font that the browser doesn't know? Like I'm wrong, right? Tom, right? So it's my Tom font. Well, I wrote it wrong. It's going to go back to the browser style. It's going to default back to this. So here's something I can do too. So if you don't know Tom, I want you to write in a sans serif. You can do that with the font family as well. What this is saying is, you know what, from all my H1 tags, give me a Tom font, but if you don't know what that is, if you don't know what Tom font means, give me a sans serif as a backup, right? And by the way, you'll see a lot of this, right? Whatever the font is, plus something else as a backup, because some browsers don't know what Tom is. In fact, all your browsers won't know what it is. It's not a standard font. But if I put something like something else that I know that's going to work, like a Consolus, I can say, give me a Consolus, but as a backup, if you don't have Consolus, give me sans serif. Notice now that I have Consolus back, even though there's both of these items in here. So we'll talk more about font and typeface later on, but I want you to just to see it as a from a very high level, 10,000 feet, kind of thing. All right, so recap. We've targeted elements in our page. We can do that. We can target specific classes or IDs. Okay, we don't have an ID. Let's add one in for our we have two sections here, this one and this one, right? And if you notice, both these sections have no class applied to them. Let's add an ID. Now this is not good practice, but let's just do this. Let's add an ID to this section, right? So I'm going to say ID is equal to, first section. I'm making it up, right? If I want to target just this section, right, but not this one, right, with a background, I can do that, right, by applying an ID to it. So let's go back to my CSS, and I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to say, well, any section, anything that has an ID of first section, right, which this is bad, all right, but I'm going to show you that you can do this. I'm going to do a background color, right, to this first section. We'll make it so that it's aqua, just to be really weird. There we go. Aqua. Okay. But it's only applying to my first section, not my second one, even though they're identical, because I've applied an ID of first section. I'll be honest with you guys and girls, this isn't the right way to do it. What you'd want to do, I'm showing you that you can do reason why I'm showing you this is because if you want to target an ID, how to do it, right? A better example would make my first section a class. And if you misspell it, take a look out now. I've made this a class, but it's not being affected. How come? It's not a class. I haven't specified a class. I can't just assume that the CSS will know. This has to say class, right? So if I change this to class, it goes back on, right? The rule can be on or off, right? Okay, cool. Let's go back to main CSS. So we've got a first section class. Anything that is a first section class applied to it would work. And by the way, first section, I'm making this whole thing, with the background color. But what if I wanted to use my first section, both my active class, as an example, and a first section, right? How do I do that? I want both classes to be effective. I can do both too, right? I could. But first of all, let's make it so that it works, right? So right here, as an example, I have a my header, right? And my header right now is got this background. I've got no class assigned to the header. So let's say, I want to make a class. I want to add a class here of masthead. Masthead. All right, so here's my masthead. So anything that has a class of masthead, right? I want to apply the masthead rules to it. So let's talk about what a masthead, what rules do we get for masthead. So let's check this out. Now there's two ways to do this. I could say all headers. This is bad. It's better to say class of masthead, any element with a class of masthead on it, which is only this one. More specific. Back to this one. So I want to say that. Let's do that. So I'll say an element with a class of masthead, right? And this whole element, I want to have a border, right? That's 1 pixel, solid, black. Okay, and if that's not good enough, let's make it so that so we can show it off 3 pixels. There we go. 3 pixels, solid black. Notice now that my masthead has a border of 3 pixels, solid black, right? It also has a background color of this. But why am I getting this background color from? Where am I getting this background color from? It's coming from my header, right? Because my header has specific styles attached to it, and so does my masthead, right? But let's suppose that my header doesn't have a specific style. I'm going to bring this header down for a second so you can see it. I'm going to kind of take it off and put it down here, right? And let's not do that. Let's say any item that has a class of header on it. Oops. So I'm going to say this, right? Any item that has a class of header gets this background color. Right now, this item here doesn't have a class of header. It's just a header, right? It doesn't have a class of header. Let's put that class back on. Well, this is how you would write this. Masthead with a class of header. Now I can apply both rules to this one. So I've got both rules applied. One rule, right? We'll take a short break in a second. One rule has a class of, or this masthead rule gives me a border that's black. And this header rule, this header class rule, so even though it's called header, it's a class, not an element anymore. I'm not targeting the element anymore with my selector. So notice my background color comes from this rule. What about if I wanted not just my header to have this background color, but also this first section? What could I do if I don't want it to be aqua? Could I do this? I could copy it. Here's something I can do. I could copy it and put it here, right? So now it has the same color as this one, right? But a nicer way to do it would be to do something like this. So I'm going to just kill this. And use comma separated values for the same rule, right? So first section. We'll make sure it's a dot, right? So both what this is saying, both elements that have headers, the header class, and elements that have the first section class, both of those get this rule. Okay? See how complex it can get. And this is where, like I told you before, developers go, Tom, it's spaghetti code. I don't understand CSS. It sucks. It's crazy. It's confusing. Everyone writes it differently. And just like I've done here, I've written it in a weird way with there's no rhyme or reason to how I'm doing it. I don't have a very specific way of doing it. I've done it on purpose, by the way, to make you all crazy, right? When you look at it, you're looking at it going, how does this work? How come it's all random like this? Well, yeah, you might see something like this again. We're going to become more structured. I'm going to suggest a structure to you, right? But you might see a page just like this. Let's take a look at an existing page before we break, okay? So here's, again, let me go back to my page. This is what I got from my page, right? If you notice, I've affected the background here, I got a border around here, I got some colors that go here, here, and here, and a background here with some colors. All these things are the things that I've done to my page by using CSS as my style. Okay, well, let's take a look at something else. Let's take a look at the Georgian College website for a second. So if I go to Georgian College, right? So I was going to look that up. Here's my Georgian College webpage. I've got content on the page, and if I want to see the styles, again, I'm going to right-click, and I can do Inspect Element, or I can do View Page Source, right? Let's go View Page Source on it. Well, okay, so there's all the HTML. Where's my style? Well, if I look down, I want to look for a CSS sheet, right, that show me my styles. So how do I find that? Well, here's one. I have a CSS or style page. Now this, obviously, this is using WP content. So Georgian, some parts of Georgian are made with WordPress. I can tell you right now, which is funny. But let's take a look. If I want to use this, if I want to see this display styles, let's take a look at the style sheet. Here's the style sheet was written for our Georgian website, right? With some additional styles here. See how we're targeting things like all IDs, all elements that have an ID of jobman login, and all elements that have IDs of jobman logged in. Both of those have a text align left and a padding of 10 pixels with top and bottom and 0 right and left. Okay, that's what this is. So you can always look at some other people's pages to see what the style they're using is. Well, let's take that one step further. Let's get back out of here, right? And let's go back to that CSS Zen Garden, right? And let's right-click here and look at my page source. And I can see that in my page source itself, right, here's my page source, right? Here's my styles.css. Let's take a look at this. And I can download the styles.css. It's actually getting me to download. I don't want that. I want it to actually look at the page. And it's doing that because it's a relative path, right, to my, my style sheet. But I can always, knowing that this is where it's getting it from, if I want to look and see where all my style sheets are, here's an example. Here's my style sheet, media and screen. Here's my style sheet right here, right? CSS. This is what my CSS looks like for this one. Here's my, and it says CSS Zen Garden Submission 2214. So Verde Moderna by Dave Shea, right? And here's his website. And it shows you his, with some, he's got quite a bit of comments in here, right, for his CSS. And it shows you how to do this thing if you wanted to apply the style. So if I wanted to do this, I could take some of this stuff right here. Let's attach this stuff to our page for our basic elements. So I'm going to take base CSS and all my hover elements up into my header H1, H2. Let's see, nothing specific. I don't want to go into like a class because I don't have those classes on my page, but up to here, up to the paragraph tag. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back to my page because I like his stuff, and I want to add them in, right? So I'm going to get rid of our styles and add his styles in here, right? Here it is. Let's take a look at what changes that makes to our page. Here's our page, right? I've applied his styles to our page to get this stuff here. Now, it doesn't fit our page layout, if you notice, right? It doesn't work for us. But you could do that. You could grab somebody else's styles and certainly apply them to your own. So if you want to get inspiration from somebody else, you'd look to see some styles that exist somewhere else. You could certainly grab those styles and include them, or take a look at what they've done and include them, because they're just styles. They're not copyrighted in any way, right? Let's undo those changes. We get back our style so we can see our page again, right? So again, let's recap to see what we've done, right? We've got to understand how to connect the style sheet to our page, right? We've already done that, and we've done that kind of in one of our very first sessions, where we use a link element right, to target where our page exists in our site structure, right? Number one. When we have our page attached, we can apply styles to our page by targeting using a selector tag, right, like body, H1, P, and so on, to target different parts of our pages. We can also target different parts of our pages with both classes, right, and IDs, right, to target different elements of our page. And then we can apply rules inside of our declaration block, right, that's in our page itself for every selector we are targeting. So I'm targeting a selector, I'm applying my rules that are inside of my declaration block to change my format or my styling on the page. Okay? Let's take a short break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask you some questions, right? I'm going to do a little quiz, right, for you guys on the stuff we just learned, right? Go. Let's take 10 minutes.